In the outer reaches of the Andromeda Galaxy, where quantum waste facilities dotted the void like abandoned temples, a mistake was about to become a miracle. The Xyrillian Empire's genetic engineering complex floated in space like a massive crystalline spider, its translucent corridors pulsing with bioluminescent energy. Within its chambers, rows of incubation pods housed their latest weapons project, crystal dragons engineered to harness the power of cosmic radiation. Nexus was different from the moment it emerged from its Genesis chamber. While its siblings sparkled with internal starfire, its crystalline body remained stubbornly dim, refracting light but generating none of its own. Chief Engineer Vex Thor's disappointment manifested in a series of clicking sounds from his auxiliary breathing apparatus as he studied the readings. Subject Nixus 217 shows no capacity for cosmic energy absorption, he dictated to his neural recorder. Internal matrix appears inert. Classification, failed specimen. Recommended action, disposal at Quantum Waste Facility Delta 9. The dragon watched through semi-transparent scales as its siblings were led away to training chambers, their bodies already beginning to pulse with power. Nixus could only curl, tighter into itself, its crystalline form catching and splitting light into rainbow patterns that danced uselessly across the sterile walls. The transport to Delta 9 was silent and cold. No guards accompanied the failed specimen. Why waste resources on something deemed worthless? The facility itself was a graveyard of forgotten technologies, failed experiments, and dangerous materials deemed too volatile to destroy conventionally. Automated systems processed Nixus's containment pod, categorizing and depositing it in a far corner of the vast complex. As the pod's stasis field failed, Nixus emerged into its new prison. The facility stretched endlessly in every direction, filled with twisted metal and broken dreams. The air itself seemed to shimmer with residual quantum energy, a byproduct of countless dangerous materials dumped here over centuries. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Nixus learned to survive by absorbing small amounts of the ambient quantum energy that permeated the facility. It wasn't the cosmic radiation it was designed for, but something different, more chaotic, more primal. The dragon's crystalline body began to change, developing subtle patterns that shifted and flowed like oil on water. Enter Finn Hawthorne, a human salvage explorer who specialized in recovering technology from abandoned alien facilities. His ship, the Stellar Scavenger, was a patchwork of recovered tech that somehow worked better than it should. Finn had built a reputation for finding valuable artifacts in the most dangerous places, but he'd never encountered anything like Delta 9. Quantum readings are off the charts, he muttered, adjusting his protective suit's shields as he navigated through the facility's twisted corridors. Something's definitely active in here, and it's not just background radiation. His sensors led him deeper into the facility, past mountains of discarded machinery and failed experiments. The readings grew stronger, more focused, until he rounded a corner and froze. There, curled among the ruins, was something impossible, a crystal dragon, its body rippling with quantum patterns that defied physics. Nixus sensed the human's presence immediately. Unlike the cold, clinical observers of its birth, this creature radiated warmth and curiosity. The dragon uncurled slightly, its form casting prismatic patterns across Finn's protective suit. Finn deactivated his helmet's opacity filters, letting Nixus see his face. "Well, aren't you something special?" he breathed, crouching down slowly. "What are you doing in a place like this?" The dragon's response was unexpected, a soft resonance that harmonized with the quantum field surrounding them. Finn's instruments went haywire, but he felt no fear. Instead, he experienced a profound sense of recognition, as if he'd found something he didn't know he was looking for. "They threw you away because you were different," Finn said softly, extending a hand. "But out here, different is what keeps you alive." Nixus approached cautiously, its crystalline form catching and refracting the light from Finn's suit. When they finally made contact, something extraordinary happened. The quantum energy flowing through Nixus synchronized with the electrical patterns of Finn's nervous system. creating a momentary bridge between their consciousnesses. In that instant, they shared everything. Nixus's pain of rejection, its lonely evolution in the quantum wastes, and its growing awareness of abilities far beyond its original design. Finn shared his own story of leaving Earth to find his place among the stars, of learning that what others considered junk often held the greatest value. As the connection faded, Finn made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "What do you say we get out of here?" he asked, already mentally reconfiguring his ship's cargo hold to accommodate his new companion. "I think you and I have a lot to teach each other." Nixus's response was to rise and move closer, its crystalline body humming with newfound purpose. Together, they made their way back through the facility, neither aware that their meeting had triggered a long-dormant monitoring system. Somewhere in the depths of Xerillian space, an alert began to flash, signaling the activation of something that was never supposed to evolve. Survival instincts, deep in the twisted metal graveyard of Station 451, where the Empires dumped their broken dreams, a dragon stirred, not the magnificent creature of legend, but something else. A being of scales worn thin by starvation, wings that hadn't felt starlight in years. They called it Razoth. Though that name had long since faded from any official record, Razoth wasn't supposed to survive. The Catharian military had engineered it along with dozens of others, meant to be the perfect fusion of biological warfare and advanced technology. But while its brethren breathed plasma hot enough to melt starship hulls, Razoth's flame barely warmed metal. They marked it defective, sealed it in a containment pod, and left it here among the other failed experiments. The first months were the hardest. Razoth learned to hunt the small mechanical vermin that infested the station, creatures that fed on electrical discharge and corroded metal. Their bodies provided little sustenance, but enough to keep death at bay. Each meal was a small victory, each day of survival an act of defiance against those who had condemned it. Then something changed. The hunger that had been Razoth's constant companion began to shift, transform. It no longer craved flesh or energy. Instead, it found itself drawn to the raw radiation that leaked from abandoned reactor cores. The same poison that would have killed other creatures became its sustenance. Marcus Reed found the dragon purely by accident. A scavenger by trade, outcast by choice, he'd come to Station 451 hunting for salvageable tech. What he found instead was a creature that defied explanation. Through the cracked viewport of his environment suit, he watched as Razoth absorbed radiation that should have been lethal, its body growing stronger with each passing moment. "Well," Marcus whispered, "looks like we've both been thrown away by the powers that be." The dragon's head snapped toward him, eyes gleaming with an intelligence that went far beyond simple survival. It didn't attack. Instead, it studied him with the same careful consideration it gave to everything in its domain. Marcus recognized that look. It was the gaze of someone who had learned the hard way to trust nothing. Days turned to weeks, as Marcus returned, bringing supplies and setting up camp in a relatively stable section of the station. He watched as Razoth continued to change. Its scales, once dull and brittle, began to develop a metallic sheen. The radiation it absorbed didn't just feed it, it was changing it on a fundamental level. "You're not what they wanted you to be," Marcus said one evening, recording observations in his battered data pad. "You're becoming something else entirely." Razoth had grown, not just in size, but in capability. The dragon now moved through radiation, fields like they were water, absorbing energy that would have killed an unshielded human in seconds. Its presence alone could interfere with electronics, creating cascading waves of electromagnetic disruption. But it wasn't until the scavenger teams arrived that they realized just how much Razoth had evolved. 3 ships, heavily armed, their crews searching for valuable tech. They found Marcus's camp, started asking questions. Then they found Razoth. The first shot from their weapons never reached its target. The energy simply vanished, absorbed into Razoth's newly evolved scales. The second and third shots had a similar fate. Then Razoth responded, not with fire, but with something far more terrifying. The radiation it had absorbed for months, pulsed outward in controlled waves, turning the attacker's own energy weapons against them. In the aftermath, as Marcus helped tend to Razoth's few wounds, he understood what he was witnessing. The military had wanted a weapon that could breathe death. Instead, they had created something that could control it, shape it, turn it from destruction to protection. "They'll come looking," Marcus said, watching as Razoth's scales rippled with absorbed energy. "The Catharians, when they realize what you've become." Razoth's response was a low rumble that made the station's metal walls vibrate. Through their growing bond, Marcus felt not fear, but readiness. The dragon had spent its exile not just surviving, but preparing. Every scrap of radiation absorbed, every adaptation forced by necessity, it had all led to this moment. Together, they began to fortify their position in Station 451. Marcus used his scavenging skills to set up early warning systems, while Razoth continued to evolve, its powers growing more refined with each passing day. The station that had been meant as a prison was becoming a fortress. "Let them come," Razoth seemed to say without words. "Let them see what becomes of those they discard." For in casting aside what they saw as broken, they had created something far more powerful than they could have imagined. A creature that didn't just survive the void, but learned to harness its very essence. Hunters and prey. The Catharian. Warship emerged from hyperspace like a predator breaking the surface of dark water. Its hull, covered in adaptive camouflage plates, reflected the void perfectly. Captain Darius Venn stood on the command deck, his cybernetic eye scanning the debris field surrounding Station 451. The readings were impossible. Radiation levels that should have turned the station into a molten heap were instead forming patterns, almost like a heartbeat. "Target located," his second-in-command reported. "Energy signature matches the prototype designation RZ7, but..." She hesitated. "It's different. Stronger. The radiation it's absorbing should have destroyed it months ago." Darius remembered the day they'd condemned RZ7 to death. He'd been there watching as their failed weapon was sealed away. Now 6 months later, the same creature was giving off energy readings that made their most advanced sensors struggle to comprehend. In the depths of Station 451, Razoth sensed their arrival. The dragon's evolved senses could detect the warship's energy signature like a splash of color against the black canvas of space. Through their mental link, Marcus felt the dragon's mixture of anticipation and grim determination. "They brought a battlecruiser," Marcus observed from their makeshift command center, surrounded by salvaged monitors showing security feeds. "Guess they're not taking any chances." Razoth's response was to move closer to the station's core, where radiation leaked from ancient reactors. The dragon had turned this deadly environment into its sanctuary, each radioactive particle adding to its growing power. Its scales now shimmered with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with the station's broken heart. The first wave of Catharian troops entered through the lower maintenance airlocks. They moved with practiced precision, their armor designed to withstand extreme radiation. What they weren't prepared for was how Razoth had changed the very nature of their battlefield. Marcus watched through the security feeds as the dragon implemented their plan. Months of preparation had taught Razoth to do more than simply absorb radiation. It could control it, shape it, use it to bend reality itself. The first squad of soldiers found their radiation shields suddenly useless, the energy they were designed to block now flowing through them like water through a sieve. "Impossible," Captain Venn muttered, watching the feeds from his troops' helmet cameras. "It's manipulating radiation at a quantum level. This isn't the same creature we discarded." The second wave of troops carried experimental weapons designed to drain energy from their targets. They never got the chance to use them. Razoth emerged from the shadows, its body now twice the size it had been during its creation. Radiation didn't just flow around it, it bent toward the dragon like light around a black hole. Through their mental link, Marcus felt Razoth's message to its former masters. "I am not your weapon. I am not your failure. I am what survival has made me." The dragon released a pulse of controlled radiation that swept through the station. Every piece of Catharian technology, Weapons, shields, communication devices went dark. In the sudden silence, Razoth's scales illuminated the corridor with an otherworldly glow. Captain Ven's voice crackled through emergency channels. "Stand down, RZ-7. You were created to serve the Catharian Empire. Return to your containment and your termination will be painless." Marcus stepped out of the shadows then, standing beside Razoth. "You still don't understand," he called out. "You thought you were creating a weapon, but you created something that evolved beyond your control. Razoth doesn't serve anyone now." The dragon's power had grown beyond even Marcus's understanding. It didn't just control radiation, it had become a master of energy itself. The forces that should have destroyed it had instead become the source of its strength. Every attempt to contain or control it only added to its power. "Final warning," Ven announced, his cybernetic eye glowing with target locks. "Surrender the asset, or we'll reduce this entire station to atoms." Razoth's response was both beautiful and terrifying. The dragon reached out with its evolved powers, touching the radioactive core of Station 451 itself. Suddenly, the entire structure hummed with controlled energy. The radiation that had been slowly destroying the station for years was now flowing through rebuilt circuits, awakening dead systems. Through their link, Marcus understood. Station 451 wasn't just Razoth's prison anymore. It had become an extension of the dragon's will. Every corroded corridor, every radiation-soaked chamber was now part of something greater. The Catharians had come to reclaim what they thought was theirs. Instead, they found themselves facing not just a surviving experiment, but a being that had transcended its original design. As alarms blared on the warship and emergency protocols activated, one truth became clear. The hunters had become the hunted, and the prey they had discarded had evolved into something far beyond their control. The power of Evolution Station 451's ancient corridors trembled as Razoth unleashed its full power. The dragon had spent months not just surviving but understanding, learning how each radioactive particle danced, how energy flowed through matter itself. Now, as Catharian forces pressed their attack, that knowledge transformed into devastating action. Captain Ven watched from his command ship as his elite soldiers, the pride of the Empire's military, found themselves outmaneuvered by the very creature they had once deemed worthless. His cybernetic eye recorded everything, streaming data that made his tactical computers stutter and crash. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, voice tight with tension, "the radiation patterns, they're not random. The dragon is creating controlled fusion reactions at a molecular level. It's not just resistant to radiation, it's mastering it." Through their mental link, Marcus felt Razoth's fierce joy. The dragon wasn't fighting with rage or vengeance, but with the pure exhilaration of finally showing its true potential. Each blast of focused radiation wasn't meant to destroy, but to demonstrate, to prove that what they had cast aside as broken had become something magnificent. The Catharian soldiers found their advanced armor suits turning against them, the radiation shielding becoming conduits for Razoth's power. Some fled, others stood their ground, but all witnessed something unprecedented, a creature that had evolved beyond the boundaries of their science. "Fall back to secondary positions," Ven ordered, his mechanical eye whirring as it tried to process the impossible readings. "Prepare the Omega Protocol." Deep in the station's heart, Marcus understood what was coming. The Omega Protocol, the Empire's last resort, a weapon designed to create an artificial black hole. They would rather destroy everything than admit their mistake had become their superior. But Razoth had prepared for this moment. The dragon's body, once dull and weak, now shimmered with concentrated power. Each scale had become a perfect radiation collector, each cell transformed into something that defied conventional physics. The station itself had become part of its evolution, every metal corridor resonating with controlled energy. "They still think they can control you," Marcus said, watching multiple screens showing the Catharian warship charging its main weapon. "They don't understand what you've become." Through their connection, Razoth shared its plan. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about transcendence. The dragon had evolved beyond simple biological constraints, becoming something that existed between the states of matter and energy. The Omega Protocol fired, a beam of concentrated dark energy meant to tear reality itself. But as it approached Station 451, something extraordinary happened. Razoth rose into the vacuum of space, its evolved form now able to exist in the void without protection. The dragon's scales blazed with accumulated power, each one a microreactor, containing months of absorbed radiation. What happened next defied explanation. The dark energy beam meant to create destruction, instead met a creature that had learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. Razoth didn't just absorb the attack, it reshaped it, transformed it, turned it into something new. Marcus watched in awe as space itself seemed to bend around the dragon. The Catharians had created Razoth to be a weapon of war, but in their hubris they had given birth to something far more profound, a being that could reshape reality itself. Captain Ven's voice crackled through all channels. What are you?" The answer came not in words, but in demonstration. Razoth released its gathered power in a controlled wave that rippled through space. Every system on the Catharian warship went dark, not destroyed but transformed. The dragon had evolved beyond the need for destruction, turning weapons of war into harmless energy. Through their mental bond, Marcus felt Razoth's message to its creators. "You abandoned me because I couldn't destroy as you wished. In doing, so you allowed me to become something greater, a creator, a transformer, an evolutionist." The Catharian warship hung powerless in space, its crew witnessing the birth of something unprecedented. Their failed weapon had become not just powerful, but transcendent. Razoth's evolution hadn't just been about survival or revenge. It had been about reaching the next stage of existence. As emergency lights flickered across the disabled warship, Captain Ven received one final message, transmitted directly into his cybernetic systems. It wasn't a threat or a demand, but a simple truth. What you discard may evolve beyond your imagination. What you deem broken may remake itself into something extraordinary. The dragon that floated in the void was no longer the creature they had abandoned. It had become something new, something that represented not the power of destruction, but the limitless potential of evolution itself. And as Marcus watched from Station 451's observation deck, he understood that this was just the beginning. Beyond the stars. The aftermath of Razoth's transformation rippled across the galaxy like waves in a cosmic ocean. Station 451, once a graveyard of forgotten experiments, now pulsed with new life. The radiation that had once been its poison became its power source, controlled and channeled through systems that Razoth had rewritten on an atomic level. Marcus stood at the newly restored observation deck, watching as ships from across the galaxy gathered at a safe distance. News of what had happened here had spread faster than light itself, the failed experiment that had evolved into something beyond its creator's comprehension. "They're afraid," he said, feeling Razoth's presence behind him. The dragon had changed again, its form now shifting between solid and energy at will. Its scales contained entire universes of possibility, each one a testament to the power of evolution. Through their mental link, Razoth shared its vision. Fear wasn't the goal, understanding was. The dragon had evolved beyond the need for revenge or dominance. What it sought now was something far more profound, the chance to help others transform, to show that what others saw as broken could become extraordinary. The first to arrive were other discarded experiments, failed prototypes, rejected creations, beings deemed too damaged or different to serve their intended purpose. They came seeking not a weapon or a leader, but proof that evolution didn't follow predetermined paths. A delegation from the Catharian Empire arrived next, led not by warriors but by scientists who had finally begun to understand what they had unknowingly created. Captain Ven was among them, his cybernetic eye now recording not for tactical analysis but for historical preservation. "We came to reclaim what we thought was ours," Ven admitted, standing before Razoth. Instead, we found something that had outgrown any possibility of ownership. You've become more than a weapon. You've become a gateway to understanding evolution itself. Razoth's response was to demonstrate. The dragon reached out with its evolved powers, touching the radiation fields that surrounded the station. Under its control, the deadly energy transformed into beautiful patterns of light and possibility. Each wave carried not destruction but potential. The potential for change, for growth, for becoming something more than what others had intended. Through their deepened bond, Marcus understood what Razoth had truly become. Not just a survivor, not just an evolved being, but a bridge between what was and what could be. The dragon had transformed radiation, the very force meant to destroy it, into a tool for creation and evolution. They'll want to study you, Marcus said, watching, as more ships arrived. Scientists, explorers, and others drawn to this miracle of evolution. They'll want to understand how you did it. Razoth's answer came in images and emotions shared through their link. Understanding couldn't come from observation alone. True evolution required letting go of predetermined paths, embracing the unknown, and having the courage to become something entirely new. Station 451 became more than a sanctuary. It became a beacon. Under Razoth's guidance, it transformed into a place where the discarded could find new purpose, where failed experiments could discover their true potential. The radiation that had once made it a dumping ground now powered innovations that defied conventional science. The Catharian Empire, faced with the living proof of their greatest mistake becoming their greatest teacher, had to evolve as well. Their weapons programs gave way to research into transformation and potential. They learned that true power came, not from controlling evolution, but from nurturing it. Marcus watched as Razoth worked with others who came seeking guidance. The dragon never simply gave answers. Instead, it showed them how to find their own paths to evolution. Each being that arrived broken left transformed, not into copies of Razoth, but into unique expressions of their own potential. Years passed, and Station 451's reputation grew. It became known across the galaxy not as a graveyard of failures, but as a crucible of transformation. The radiation that still permeated its corridor served as a reminder. Sometimes the very thing meant to destroy you could become the key to your evolution. Razoth continued to evolve, each day bringing new understanding of the universe's possibilities. The dragon that had once been deemed a failure had become a living testament to the power of adaptation, proof that evolution knew no bounds when fueled by the will to survive and grow. As Marcus stood watching a new group of arrivals dock at the station, he felt Razoth's satisfaction through their bond. The dragon had transformed not just itself but the very meaning of failure and success. In the end, being abandoned had given it the freedom to become something that its creators could never have imagined. Not a weapon of destruction, but a catalyst for evolution itself. The stars seemed brighter now, as if reflecting the possibilities that Razoth had unlocked. What had begun as a story of survival had become a legend of transformation, a reminder that true evolution knew no bounds. The failed experiment had not only survived, it had shown the galaxy a new way to grow, to change, to become more than the sum of its intended parts.